A big welcome to everybody, in particular Dr. Griffin from the museum and to the Polytech's journalism course, both sitting in today and to media. Amihu ki te reo Māori, ki o te reo Māori. It's Māori Language Week, so I'd start with the Māori welcome. We have nothing in public forum, so we'll move straight to apologies. We've got an apology from Dave, from the mayor, who can't be here for a funeral, and from Councillor Lord for potential early departure, depending on how timely we are. So I will move, if there are no everyone else is here, I'll move that those apologies be noted. So second, thank you, Councillor Hawkins. I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? That's carried. Not sure where they are. Yeah. Confirmation of the agenda. Our very astute GSO has just noticed that the item is currently in Part B, which is the grants review, is likely to actually be a Part A item in the sense that because it's just for the purpose of consultation, it can actually just go directly out, doesn't have to be signed off by council. So that is a likely change, but we're just checking up on that with the other GSOs to make sure that we're right. So that may move into Part A, but I don't want to hold up the agenda for confirmation if everyone's happy with that. So I will confirm the agenda as it is, noting that that change may occur. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Peake. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? That's carried. Declaration of interest just for noting. So moving to 4 minutes of the Settlers Museum. We've got 2 separate sets of minutes. I noticed Councillor Gazette wasn't there the first time, so it may be Wilson happy to move first time. And seconded, thank you, Councillor Hawkins. So any debate or questions or discussion on that? If not, that's number 1 only. I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Against? It's carried. Number 2, thank you, Councillor Gazette. Seconded. Councillor Wilson, thank you. Any questions or debate on that? If not, I'll put that motion. All those in favour? Aye. Against? It's carried. So moving on to number 5, the Otago Museum History Report, and welcome Dr. Griffin to join us. Thank you very much for coming in, Ian. And 2 pages or 4 pages of seemingly fairly good news. Can I hand over to you to make any comments you would like to?
Kia ora. I just want to say, speak to the report.
Thank you.
I want to speak to the report. As you can see from the report, we think we've had a really good year at the museum. In fact, I'd like to start with a confession. The numbers that we sent to you, I put together in a slight rush, and I forgot that we'd opened the annex. So actually we had another 11,000 people through. So if you feel that we can add in the folks through the annex as additional, then the final numbers for the museum this year were 508,829, rather than the 497 that I mentioned in the report. It's been a year of considerable change at the museum. We've had almost complete change to the management team, and during that year I'm pleased that we've managed to attract so many people to the museum. We've maintained our TripAdvisor rating, and the financial situation is good. We are on a stable and even keel. The next year is going to be a big year for the museum. We're starting the redevelopment of Discovery World, which is our main hands-on science centre at the museum. And we're presently out inviting concept designs from a number of companies inside and outside New Zealand. And we will choose the design that we think is best aligned with our educational goals. And we're hopeful, with a little bit of fundraising, that we'll reopen Discovery World within the next 18 months. If I may indulge myself with the committee for a moment, Discovery World is pretty critical for the museum. And I'd like to refer folks, if you've not read this, there's an article that came out in the American Scientist magazine by a researcher called John Falk, and it's called the 95% Solution. And this paper basically makes the point that in your lifetime, you only spend 5% of your life at school or studying. Most people learn most things outside of school and outside of the university environment. And places like the museum, the centres of informal learning, are seen as a critical part of the population's learning opportunities. And I do, again, want to thank the Council for the public money that we do get, because I honestly believe that the museum and all of the other museums and the art gallery in Dunedin play a critical role in not just attracting talented people to Dunedin, but also in inspiring young people to take an interest in culture, science and arts. So I think the work that we do at the museum, as well as obviously preserving our cultural heritage, the inspirational role that we play, hopefully inspiring young people from this region to kind of take an interest in science and art and culture, is sometimes unrecognised. And certainly in the museum sector, we're trying hard to get national government to recognise this, because I'm very conscious that our entire funding base, outside of the money we generate ourselves, comes from the ratepayers of this city. And I feel that our collection is nationally and internationally important, and we should somehow figure out ways of getting national funding for some of the things we're trying to do. In addition to Discovery World's redevelopment, we're exploring the option of building a planetarium at the museum, which will be a new attraction for us. It will enable us to do lots of things we can't do at the moment. And we're also about to open a brand new exhibition called Gifts and Legacies, which celebrates the very generous people from this region who've given their collections to the museum over the last 146 years. And it's full of some fantastic things, from a surfboard that was bitten into by a shark, to some brilliant furniture, to some wonderful dresses. And we're also using this as an opportunity to relaunch the Friends of the Museum, to encourage more people to join the Friends and help support us, but hopefully encourage the next generation to consider giving their precious things to the museum. One last thing I'd like to say is that the museums in Dunedin are very proud of the fact that next May we'll be hosting Museums Aotearoa's conference. The Otago Museum is the main base for the conference, but we're collaborating with Tuetu, the Art Gallery, and Ulverston and many of the other museums around the city. And museum folks and art gallery folks from all over the country will be congregating here, so it'll be a fantastic opportunity to show all the great stuff that's going on to our peers. That's all I want to say. I'm more than happy to answer any questions about the report.
Thank you, Ian. Does anyone have any questions? Councillor Kelly.
I loved reading about all the things you've been doing in the museum, and it sort of quite inspirational, makes you want to pack your bags and come on down there.
Please do.
Two things. The commercial sustainability thing, where I see that you're increasing the number of people who are collections, how did you say? Could you tell us a wee bit more about where you're going to with commercial sustainability? And the second, just minor point, was when you said you were mostly funded by ratepayers of Dunedin, you didn't mean Dunedin, did you? You meant,
yes, I meant, sorry, all the funding bodies, I apologise.
Yes, I thought you'd meant that. I just wanted to clarify in case it came out in the wrong.
Yes, yeah. Well, commercial, I mean, as hopefully councillors are aware, the museum does work pretty hard to cover a significant fraction of our operating costs from commercial activities, and more people through the door generally helps us do that. So in terms of the commercial sustainability, what we're doing to be able to employ more people on the collection side, we've made some savings in the staffing over the last year, and some fairly hefty savings at the senior management level have enabled us to employ some more folks who would be working directly in the collections. We are confident, and there are several board members from the museum around the table, that we take a very conservative approach to management of our finances, and we're determined to cover as much of the costs, for example, of the redevelopment of Discovery World from our own reserves and by fundraising from other trusts and foundations. We recognise that money is tight at the city, and we don't want to be coming to you for extra money, because we're pretty much aware that there's not much there. So we hope we're taking a very conservative approach to the financial management, and as you will see when our annual report comes out, I think in September this year, we've done a reasonably good job, and we've got a very steady ship, and there aren't any financial issues coming down the track.
Thank you. Further questions? Councillor Bentley.
I'm delighted to hear that you're going to be celebrating your 140 plus years of Gifts and Legacies. there have been in the past, quite distant past mostly, some very substantial gifts and legacies to the Otago Museum. Do you see an opportunity, I mean, you mentioned that this gifts and legacies may focus potential donors on Otago University or on Otago Museum or any of the other facilities, but do you see a possibility of return to a situation where, because Otago Museum is held in such high regard, that you will be able to get much more substantial gifts and legacies in the future?
I'm very hopeful that we are, and indeed in this exhibition I'm pleased to report that someone who's not actually given something but will give something when he passes away is featured in the exhibition. We have benefited from some extraordinarily generous people over the last 146 years. In fact, I mean, I've got to draft this out. This is the catalogue of the exhibition, and there are so many extraordinary beautiful things, from Ernest Shackleton's rocks to dresses and furniture, to things like this. There's some extraordinary, beautiful and precious things that have been given to us, and we do hope to encourage a culture of giving in the present generation. And that's very much the focus of this exhibition. It's more or less trying to say, look, folks in the past have really supported the community by giving us or sharing their precious material. What can you do to help?
And do you also see a role for the Otago Museum to play in also getting gifts and legacies that might be perhaps more appropriate for Toitu or for the Dunedin Public Art Gallery?
Well, I think we all work together in this area, and within, you know, the individual collecting policies of the institutions mean that there's not much duplication, if any. So it's pretty clear that, you know, if someone wants to give some kind of computer thing, for example, go to Toitu. If they give an art piece, it's probably going to go to the art gallery. And I would hope that if someone came up with a set of Einstein's papers, they'd give it to me. But also the Otago Museum. But joking aside, I think we do work together as institutions in the city. And there are certain areas where we overlap. I mean, we've got a textiles collection, Toitu's got a textiles collection, we've got some ceramics, the art gallery's got some ceramics. But we're pretty good-natured in the way that we make sure that we don't duplicate across the institution. So if your question is, you know, are we competing? I don't think that's the case at all. We're definitely collaborating.
Great. Now, I see a lot of potential in positive collaboration. Thank you.
Further questions?
Thank you. Excuse me, last time you were here, we talked about the possibility or the desirability of establishing some sort of contestable fund for non-Wellington Museum funding. Has there been any progress or development of those discussions?
There's been no progress in well, I've had discussions with lots of different politicians. Whether there's been, I don't think there's been any progress in the sense that it's not really on the political agenda. I think there are so many other pressures on funding. But you can see that when one looks at the distribution of the national museums in this country, a lot of stuff is in Wellington, and Te Papa are opening a new place in Auckland. I think there is some moral argument to say that perhaps the South Island should have some opportunity to get funded so that its residents have the same opportunities as those in the North Island. But obviously, we're just a museum in Dunedin and we need everybody to work together, and that's really one of the things we're going to try and hopefully make a theme at the conference next year. But I'm very much aware that, you know, we've got material at our museum that is nationally important. It is basically, the preservation of it is basically being funded by local ratepayers from this region. It seems to me that if we had access to more funding, I could employ more staff to look after it. I could interpret it better. I could do more things that would benefit not just us, but the people of the whole country.
Well, I think I mentioned it last time, if I may, that when the Minister for Arts, Culture and Heritage visited on another matter, he did express his own view of the desirability of a fund of this kind being established. And I just think there's an opportunity for those involved in the supplementary say to actually make an approach to Mr. Finlayson in respect of initiatives within Cabinet. It's a good time for new initiatives.
And I'd also point out that outside of the culture, cultural finances, there's also significant funding going into science and society from the Ministry of Business, Innovation and Employment. And as I've already pointed out, 95% of your life is outside schools, and that whole strategy hopefully will recognise the importance of museums, and there might be some national funding coming through that route as well, so not just in the cultural stovepipe. Thank you.
Thank you. Good question. You have a question?
Yeah. Look, Ian, I was just, or Dr. Griffin, should I say? I was just going to ask the question, what percentage of what you hold in trust and the stuff that you've had donated to you is on display at any one time, as opposed to what percentage is in storage?
That's a hard question to answer, because we think we've got roughly 1.8 million objects, and they do range in size from little tiny mosquitoes to pretty enormous whales. But on average, I would guess something like 15 to 20% of stuff that we hold is on display. But that would be a guesstimate. It may be slightly more, might be slightly less.
Sorry.
Do you have a policy, is that a policy that you are constantly recycling that?
We do, yes. We constantly recycle a lot of the exhibitions. And of course, when we redo a major gallery, a lot of stuff will go away. Because you can only keep some of the precious things on display for a certain amount of time because of light issues or environment issues. So we do cycle through the collection, and that's part of our regular operations.
That's awesome. You
And
want
the
to
second move.
second, Councillor Staines. Any debate?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Hoki Mai Koe. Welcome back. Dr. Griffin, just congratulations to you on your report. I had thought when I looked at that number, 480-something thousand, that you were a bit short, because I thought we'd cracked 500,000 at your museum, and that would be a record number, I think, of visitors in only 1 year. Would that be right?
Well, I think in previous years, as many as 600,000 have come through when we opened Butterfly House. So.
Anyway, it's well up there, and it's showing, I think, what I have a feel about Otago Museum at the moment, that's in a resurgent and dynamic mode, and the platform for that has been this new strategic plan that you've helped steer through. So thank you for that. I just want to make a couple of observations. That this new emphasis on collections and research is going to breathe real life into this museum, and I think you've led a very good charge on that. All power to you too for getting central government funding. For many of us, we've thought that Wellington has a responsibility for a museum that is carrying so much treasure. So I hope your representations there to government come on. Thanks too for your strong support for the International Science Festival, which proved once again that Dunedin is a place of science and research, and the museum is a very critical part of that. So thanks for all that.
Further debate? If not, I would also just add my gratitude, Dr. Griffin. I think the numbers speak for themselves really in terms of numbers through the door, and for me, and personally, I was most excited to read about things like the Dodwell Centre, and albeit I had to Google what photonics and quantum optics were, and I think it's partnerships with the university which are coming through really strongly as well in the documentation that we've got here, which is more in depth than we've had in the past, and so it could be that has always been the case, but I appreciate very much hearing about it. So thank you, and thank you for taking the time to come along. I'll put the motion. All those in favour, aye? Aye. Against? It's carried. Thank you. So with that, we move to number 6, and I've just had confirmation from the DSOs that it is indeed a Part A matter, so that will be noted. Welcome Rebecca and Paul and Jan in the back row there. You don't want to join us. So I'll hand over to you guys to make any opening comments.
Yes, thank you. And kia ora, and thank you for the opening for Māori Language Week. I wish I had more material to reply in the appropriate manner. But there are tags around the council building, so hopefully my language skills will improve as a result. Thanks for the opportunity just to open on the grants review. The grants review has been a significant piece of work for our team, and overall at this stage we've gone out, so we came to council with to the committee with a draft document, and as a result of that we've been out to the community, well Jan mainly has been out to the community in a number of different ways. We've touched base with our civic partners and civic grant and service level agreement partners. We have written to previous grant recipients, and we've gone to the People's Panel, and we've hosted public meetings. And through all of that feedback, it's been fairly positive to date. We have changed a few things as a result of the feedback we've received, and that's detailed in the report. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank Paul and particularly Jan for their work on this project. Community Development has attempted to do a piece of work on grants since at least 2001. We think it's actually earlier than that, and so to get it to this stage has been quite an accomplishment, and I just really wanted to pay particular tribute to the work that Jan and Paul have done to get us there. What the work did highlight, however, was that there is a need for some more strategic work in two particular areas, and that's why we've just handed out 2 additional resolutions for your consideration. One was around the delivery framework for the social wellbeing pathways themselves, and secondly, how future fiscal decisions made by the council take into account the strategic framework that council is near finalising. So to that end, I've tabled 2 motions for your consideration about our plans in those 2 areas, and the reason, because they're both noting pieces of staff work or report back. The reason why we've made them resolutions is to add a level of accountability to that work, so that it's on record that we're suggesting it and that it comes back to committee and council for its consideration. So I'm sorry for the lateness of those 2 resolutions, but I think it's important that this review is seen in its bigger context, and how the council might move forward into the future. So I think that's all we've got to say first up, but we're all here to answer any specific questions people may have.
Thank you, Becca. Questions? Questions? Councillor Thompson.
My question is on page 628, and I acknowledge I had raised an issue around the previous criteria which forbade the providing grants to organisations that were funded by government, and I noticed that the change has taken place here, and I'm grateful for that, thank you. But it just occurred to me when I was rereading it last evening that the criteria here are understood perhaps by us, but they're going to have to be read by members of the public, and I just wonder if it's possible. I think in retrospect, many people reading this would read activities as essentially being the organisation, and whether there could be some clarification that makes it clear that it's the centrally funded activities we won't provide rather than centrally funded organisations. And I apologise because you have made the change that I suggested. Just reading it again in the cold hard light of day, I'm just not sure whether others would understand it quite as clearly. So if that was possible, I'd be grateful.
I think it's just
It's just a
provide clarity, basically.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
thank you. Councillor Benders.
On page 6.28, under general criteria number 5, it says the proportion of overhead costs relating directly to the project may be included in total project costs. What proportion are we talking about? That proportion implies a specific proportion. What proportion is it?
Where, for an example, might be that an organisation comes to us and says this is going to be a quarter of our work for the year, so they could put a quarter of their salary costs towards in the funding application as part of their contribution or what they're asking us for.
And rather than that.
So it should be a proportion.
Could be a, yeah.
So, and it can be any proportion really.
Yes.
Thank you.
Relative to the project.
Further questions? Councillor Hawkins, and then Councillor.
Tēnā koe, Madam Chair. My question is about the changing of the name to, well, the proposed changing of the name to the DCC Social Wellbeing Grant, which has then been reversed in this to go back to Community Wellbeing Grant. Given that it had fairly strong, 2/3 of people who gave feedback on this supported the change, of which a number of those are already recipients of that grant, and one of the reasons for not changing it is that it's confusing people, but if it's supported by those who are already in that system, how much of an issue is that really?
Madam Chair, this mainly came to us through the public meetings where people said to us they don't understand social wellbeing, but they understand community development. So we took into consideration that, and there's another thing that currently we also fund some environmental projects, and if you're an environmental group, you're not going to look into the social wellbeing strategy for that funding. So they're going to scan it, new groups will scan it and go, there's nothing for us here. Whereas at the moment we would fund some of what they do. So it's just a...
We really don't.
We're not going to die in the sand over this. It was just, we don't, you know, we think by leaving it the same, it's got a marketing issue out there already, but by changing it's all right as well. We're just concerned about those environmental groups getting access to it.
Are those groups those environmental groups that you refer to, would they be ruled out by the current criteria?
No, not ruled out, just that they just wouldn't expect to look in this area. If you're searching through our documents for grants, there isn't anything for you there.
That's new people, not yes.
Okay.
I mean, I just wanted, given the longer term goal of aligning our grants funding to our strategic objectives, whether, I mean, that decision, I mean, there's no good time maybe to change it. Around the review of accountability requirements, it says it's to be completed. This is, sorry, page 6.19. What timeline does that work on?
We're expecting this all going smoothly and going well to be in place at this time next year, so for the new financial year. So we will be looking at and going out and talking to people about the accountability requirements in the next process, and then saying this is what you need to be accountable on. The accountability came a lot of it out of the People's Panel, and so there is already accountability. People do have to tell us they've spent the money, they do have to show us what they've spent it on and how that has worked, and we do go and look at that. So it's not that we're not doing any accountability, it's just tightening it up and bringing it more aligned with the social wellbeing strategy and the community.
And just lastly, if I may, there are a number of comments here about making the process easier for applicants, or the impact that the changes would have on the effort required by applicants to apply for funding, but nothing specifically that I could see about how the changes would affect the time, resources specifically that staff have to put into this. And I wonder, because I'm aware that it is a very intensive process time-wise for staff, whether any of these changes will alleviate any of those constraints, or in fact make it worse if we're doing more rounds in a given year.
It will add some work, but the advantages of the grants is that they introduce us to organisations, and often they introduce us to organisations at the very beginning of their process. So it allows us to actually do some of our community development work. It allows us to network with them. It allows us to ensure that if there's duplications, they go and talk to the people that are duplicating. So yes, there is some more work because of that extra funding round, but we also see it as part of an advantage as well.
And a little bit of that is incorporated in that first new recommendation around looking at how we deliver our the pathways and the social wellbeing strategy, and is the way we do things the right way of doing things, and could it be done better?
Thank you.
Thanks for this report. Just wondered whether you remind me at 6.18, The reference at top left there to the major events, premier events support and the separate nature of those. Just how does that kind of align with the other grants you might give to other events, smaller grants obviously, and why is it in a separate process?
So the major and premier events come out under the festival and events strategy, and there had been, councillors will be aware that we have flagged this review for some time. We haven't flagged a review for the events. We've only just started flagging a review for the events and festival strategy. I think that work won't be far away. We've had one meeting with the new committee for the events and festival strategy, and that has highlighted some work that needs to be done, and so that certainly is an area for focus going forward. It's just not part of the specific review.
So going forward, what sort of time frame are you looking at for that?
Hopefully, what is it? It's July. I don't know. I'm sorry, I haven't given that thought. We just need to prioritise this work here as well, alongside with our art and culture strategy and the finalising of this. So I'm sorry I can't give you a clearer answer on that, but we do know it's something that needs to be done, and it will be done within 12 months. I'm just not sure where in 12 months.
Thank you.
Any further questions? If not, would someone like to move? Councillor Sain, thank you.
As amended.
Second, Councillor Vanders. Thank you.
Oh, sorry, is this amending including these two motions up there? In that case, I'll get someone else to second.
Second, Councillor Wilson, thank you. Okay, so it looks like it's Councillor Noon. It's fine. And Councillor Vanders, if you'd like to speak to the motions, thank you.
Yeah, I would very much like to congratulate whoever it was that actually went and did all the work to get the criteria organised for these various different grants. I have in the past, going back some 10 years now, been very disappointed that we didn't really have proper criteria, and that what criteria we did have tended to be so loosely worded that they weren't adhered to anyway. So I don't know who's actually responsible for what is really a sea change in grants. I love the way that you've taken various types of grants. You've looked very closely at the actual use that you want those grants to go to, and the criteria have actually done a lot to ensure that you will actually get a result for those things. So whoever's responsible for that, I don't know who it is, just thank you very, very much. It's really quite different from what we had some years ago. Having said that, I do wonder a wee bit about these last two motions that have just popped up on the board and that we've just been given here, which both seem to involve staff spending time preparing reports. In the first case, outlining a delivery framework, and in the second case, scoping a cross-council project, considering funding mechanisms. It goes on for a wee bit. Given that the criteria seem to me to be so good, and that it means that whoever is deciding on funding has a nice clear steer regarding where things go, I wonder if we really do need these extra reports and more staff time. To me, I think the report as it is just peachy, and I'm very happy to go with it. I do wonder about these latest two, but perhaps someone might like to enlarge on the need for them.
The General Manager.
Can I just follow up on that? Particularly the last recommendation. This is a piece of work that is complementary really to the grants review. So it was planned and underway. Well, it was planned to be embarked on soon anyway. We're just reporting it here because it complements this work. And so that's the point. It's not complicated. It's not. It complements the grants review rather than...
But what's the reason for it? I mean, it can be complementary, but where's the value in it? Why are we putting staff time into it?
Because for the past 18 months, we've been working with stakeholders to develop the strategic framework, and we almost have that in place. We've got two strategies yet to complete. The next step of that work was always intended to be linking the strategies and the priorities to budgetary decisions. So that's the scope. That's what the focus is of this piece of work. How does that strategic framework translate into the decisions that council makes in future about funding decisions? And the grants work is just one element of that, but there are all sorts of operational decisions about budgets which you take through your budget decision process.
So do I understand from the last line then, to ensure that fiscal decision making aligns with council strategic priorities, do I understand that would mean that if we find ourselves with a bit of extra money unexpectedly, we can increase the grants, and if we find ourselves in a real crunch point, we can actually decrease them? Is that what it's talking about? I find the language difficult.
Right. What it means is whatever decisions are being taken by the council, they're taken in full knowledge of what the priorities are in that strategic framework, whether it's allocating further money to a topic area, or a decision has to be taken to reduce a budget in a certain area.
Okay.
Those decisions are taken mindful of what the agreed strategic priorities are.
So this report that scopes the cross-council project business, that will basically sort of spell out the way you're going to do that.
That's right, and we're hoping that will be, we'll be able to present that to you in time for your strategic workshops that you have in September and later this year, feeding into the LTP.
But happier, thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Thompson, then Councillor Calvert.
I had some similar concerns, but I'm not averse to the work being done, but where my concern was arising in this fourth one was around, like Councillor Vanderbilt, I was struggling to understand exactly what it meant, but to the extent that it implies that you've got a set of criteria for grants in here, but sitting above that might be a super set of criteria, that in my view, to the extent that were to be an outcome, or one of the outcomes, and I recognise it's wider than grants, but it just feels to me slightly wrong that you would have a set of criteria, you would consult on them, you would say these are the criteria, but lurking in the background would be something that said, well, if you apply under these criteria and you're such and such, you haven't got boulders shown. You know, it just feels slightly strange.
I see the two things as complementary. So the strategic framework decisions, they won't necessarily. I think the focus of the second piece of work is more about the general decisions that council is taking about operation and capital budgets within council. So what are the areas within council that we want to prioritise for the coming 12 months or few years in order to deliver on the strategic framework, whereas the criteria for grants are like kind of a subset of those. So I think the two will be, they'll be complementary rather than contradictory.
I'm just not really sure why they belong with this.
I guess it's additional information to reassure. I suppose it's context information. It's not essential to this. It's not essential to the grants review. It's for noting as a complementary piece of work. It was intended to assist and give you some more context rather than make it more complicated, which possibly it has.
Would you like to speak to the motion, Councillor Thompson, or because we have moved on from question time?
Well,
Despite
I didn't think it was a question really. I thought it was a comment, but I'll ask Councillor Bazette for a better way of doing it.
Councillor Calvert, do you have further questions, or would you like to speak to the motion?
I'd like to speak to the motion. In fact, I specifically don't have any further questions, and I am really wanting to put my heartfelt thanks to the staff and whoever wrote or was part of writing this report, because it's such a good report and so comprehensive that they've thought of all of the answers to any of the questions I might have asked in advance, and the highest possible praise I can give to them is that I haven't been asking any questions. As regards these two, which I presume are 3 and 4, not 1 and 2, at the end of here, since they seem to be both denoting something that's happening, I don't understand them, but I don't mind noting them.
Thank you. Further debate or discussion? No? If not, come to your right of reply. I'll just make a couple of comments. Firstly, adding my thanks to Rebecca's, to Jan and to Paul for the fairly significant amount of work that's gone into this project. I think our first meeting was back in February or something, so it's been a lengthy process and going right back to 2001 or whenever it was that the first efforts in this regard were taken. Rebecca showed me a report this morning that went up in 2001, so it's been a long gestation for this particular, to come to this particular point. So thank you both, or thank you all very much for that work. I guess speaking first to these two additional points, or these two additional motions, I think it is important that we note the context for these grants and for this grants review. And the reason for that is because just as we have been putting some rigour around the economic development strategy and asking that all of our decisions within the context of the, or with economic development are made in the context of the economic development strategy, I think we need to be requesting the same rigour around social wellbeing, our social wellbeing strategy. And this, the number three, or number one, or number three, as Councillor Calvert points out, does exactly that. It requests that staff bring, or it notes that staff will be bringing forward some work that identifies how this piece of grants work. It's not an additional set of criteria, but how these grants sit within the delivery mechanisms, or the suite of delivery mechanisms on those pathways which do make up our social wellbeing strategy. And I think at a governance level, that's where we need to be focusing. We need to be ensuring that every piece of work that we're doing, every line of expenditure is directed towards the outcome of our strategies. The second, or the number four there, is in relation to the bigger picture, and I do think it may be overload in terms of noting what the context for it, but I think it wasn't necessarily covered off in the paper, and it's a good thing to note that it all fits within that broader cross-council work. So I personally see this as a bit of a transition phase. I think that once we do have all of our suite of strategies in place and that number four, that cross-council project has been completed, it may well be that we think we need grants to deliver differently for us, or they need to be delivering in a way that is perhaps complementary to other mechanisms, other delivery mechanisms in another way. But I think as a interim step, as a stepping stone on the way to a destination, I think there are a number of changes in here that have been in the wings for a long time and needed to be made. So I'm supportive of what's in here. I'm not sure I would agree with Councillor Vandervis that this is a sea change. I think it's a considered set of changes which will allow us to be slightly more precise and slightly more targeted in the way that we deliver grants, and it improves process around particularly civic grants, which at the moment we don't have a lot of rigour or process around. So thank you again, staff, for your work, and I look forward to these next stages and seeing where they go. Councillor Staines, you're right of reply.
Thank you. In moving that the new strategy be taken, I recognise that there is a need to make sure at the higher level that our funding, as we apply ratepayer funding to various projects, various organisations to deliver, that what they are delivering lines up with the key strategies that are sitting in our framework. And so there's been a little bit of discussion at our meeting here today around what is in this, in item 4, which is the piece of work to be done. And I think it's very important that we have criteria, good criteria to help those who are deciding whether a grant should be given or not to a particular type of organisation. But that grant also needs to be made taking into consideration the goals that we were trying to achieve in the strategy sitting on the framework. So I think Councillor McTavish made the comment around economic development and the pool of money that we use there to drive economic development projects. The same rigour needs to be applied to those, to any area where we're funding, to make sure that we apply our funding to projects which will take us where we wish to go, and where we wish to go is what we have in our strategy. And if we want to do something other than that as a council, then we should take a look at the strategy and say, did we get it right, or should we be changing the goals or the targets that we have set within our strategy so this particular thing that's come along fits. But we shouldn't be saying we want to go here, but we'll apply funding that takes us there. So I think it is a piece of work that needs to be done. I don't think it needs to fundamentally change the work that has been done in this policy, but I think it will add another layer to it to make sure that as we grant grants, we do make sure that they are applied to take us where our strategies, where we've indicated our strategies we want to go. So I fully support it.
Thank you. Well, with that, I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Yeah, sorry, can we take 3 and 4 separately, please?
So 1 and 2, you're happy to be together? So I'll move 1 and 2. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against? It's carried. And you happy for 3 and 4 together? Is everyone else happy for 3 and 4 together? So I'll move 3 and 4 together. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against?
No, recorded, please.
Recorded, councillor. Unanimous. That's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you both. So, part 7, or number 7, is notification of agenda items for consideration by the chair. And a note, Councillor Benson-Pope, the issue that you've raised in relation to potentially an approach to the Minister, and I'll discuss that with staff and see what we can come up with and treat that as a matter for notification. Is there any other further matter for notification for the chair? If not, then I will, that means we've come to the public excluded part of our meeting, so thank you all for attendance, and I'll move that we move into non-public. Do I have a second for that? Thank you very much. Councillor Staines, all those in favour? Against? That's carried.